I'd like to call the meeting to order. May I get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Craig?
Yeah.
Mrs. Fields?
Here.
Mr. Hyland? Not here. Mr. Nuss?
Here.
Mrs. Ranzan?
Here.
Mrs. Steele? Here. Mrs. Stahl?
Here.
Mrs. Whitty?
Here.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Can you please join me in the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Sussex-Wantage Regional School District Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the school building and notice of said meeting sent to the New Jersey Herald and the Star Ledger.
The Sussex-Wantage Regional School District is a responsive, caring, child-centered community. Our mission is to educate each individual to become a competent, lifelong learner and a productive, responsible citizen by providing challenging opportunities in a safe environment through a partnership of friends, families, schools, and communities.
At this time, I'd like to invite Kathy Hallowa from the NJSBA up for our board member training.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for convening for just this purpose. I don't need to take very long, but I also want to make sure that if you guys have any questions, you ask them, right? I'm happy to answer any kind of questions or issues that you might have, but by way of introduction, I'm Kathy Hallowa, your field service representative with New Jersey School Board. So if you have any kind of questions on boardsmanship or something like that, I am a great resource for you, I like to think, and my contact information is on back here. But it's very good to be back in Sussex-Wantage. Thank you for having me. So we are going to talk about the school superintendent's annual evaluation. And if you've gone to New Jersey School Board programs, I'm sure you've heard that the most important job that a board has before it is to appoint the right superintendent, right? So you're taking care of that. I know very well that that process worked out lovely. So your second most important job is to evaluate that superintendent annually. Because as you know, you can have a wonderful board, wonderful teaching staff, but the individual who makes the most difference in your school district is your superintendent. So it's important to revisit what your superintendent does, how the performance is on the goals that you set. Were they realistic? Were they effective? How did they go? These are conversations that the board needs to have, and they are formalized annually within this document. And when it's done correctly, there's really no better opportunity for engagement between the board and the superintendent than the superintendent evaluation process. So that being said, I keep shaking this booklet, but I want to note at the outset that although the evaluation is an annual requirement, you don't have to use our tool. As per statute and code, as long as the board and the superintendent agree upon the evaluation method, you're in good shape. So you have to have that buy-in in the beginning. That being said, if you look at the back sheet of your booklet, it's got all the relevant statute and code, all the fine print, all the legalese on what is required from boards of education in relation to the evaluation process. So you don't have to read it right now. I'm certainly not going to read it to you, but our instrument covers all of that, and our process covers all of that, which I'll walk you through. You don't have to use it. It is free of charge to board members. I will tell you, it is a comprehensive process, as I'm sure you're figuring out by looking at this stuff, right? It's something that you really do have to allow yourself enough time to do. It's something that you really have to focus on as board members, but as we say, it's really the second most important job of a board of education is to review their superintendent, right outside of reporting work. So let's take a look at what this is all about here. So this is a different tool than what our older board members are probably used to, because we, with NJASA, revamped this. Took like 3 years. But the old one was getting kind of dated. It was 7 years old going up, and by the time we were done, it was 10 years old. And things in education, of course, have changed. So, it was worth another kind of look at, and, something that would be really definitive as to what educational leaders are expected to do. And also, at the same time, making sure that the evaluation is something that's within the board members' purview, that, that everybody stays in their swim lane. So what we wound up doing is we kept the first part, which is evaluation on progress towards district goals that each board sets for itself, right? So that's kind of the same. But what we did in conjunction with ASA is we decided on new leadership standards, which is part 2 of the evaluation. And those leadership standards came directly from the P-Cell standards, which in themselves are rather new. I think they came out in 2015. There were about 10 of those. We certainly not only did we want to not have an evaluation that went through 10 different leadership standards, some of them, therefore, all professional educational leaders, including building principals, curriculum directors. So some of them really don't speak to the board member's role, and as we worked together with ASA, we were able to refine them into the goals into the leadership standards that you see here. So they are all printed here, and basically, this book is the paper copy of what it looks like to go in and evaluate your superintendent online. When you go in to do this, this is pretty much what you are going to see. So if we look at it, at the instrument itself, which starts on page 6, you have the goal assessment. What will happen is when you go in to do your part, if this is what you use, your superintendent will already have entered those goals that are unique to Sussex-Wantage. So those will be there. That's only for you guys to see. Then we get into the more standardized part, which are the leadership standards. And we start with standard 1, okay? And it goes to, let's see on which page it stops. I think it's 12, but I'm not 100% sure. Stops on page 12. So from 1 to 6. So let's look at the first one, right? Mission, vision, and core values. Each standard is stated and it's defined. What does that really mean, right? Well, effective educational leaders advocate, and act, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so it defines each of the standards. Every one of these standards are treated that way. And then, what I also like, which gets everybody on the same page, we kind of wipe out confusion about what exemplary means. What does proficient mean? What does unsatisfactory mean? They are all defined uniquely to each standard. So if you look at standard 1, it tells you what an exemplary superintendent does in relation to that. If you look at standard 2, it's a little bit different. Standard 3, et cetera, et cetera. It's all unique to the standard. So when you're checking off exemplary, you know what that means. Your definition of exemplary will match up better with someone else's definition as exemplary. That was kind of an issue we had with the last format. Something that I also want to point out, which is particularly relevant on this board, is not observed, because we do have new members, right? Not observed is simply that. It's not observed. It is not a dig at anybody. It's not, well, I haven't seen my superintendent have any strong shared beliefs and values about a vision, so I'm checking off not observed like a dig. That's not what it's about. It just means, we see this an awful lot with new board members. I just haven't been in service for long enough to have seen this in a robust manner. And sometimes if I was conflicted, right? If I had a spouse or someone belonging to me who worked for the district when I started, I'm no longer conflicted, they've retired, you might get you might get some not observed in there too. So those are the ratings, the actual ratings. And how do we rate your superintendent on each of the standards? Well, we have indicators to assist us in our thinking that way. Each of the standards has 7 indicators. You read these indicators, they are germane to the standard. They're all different on each page, so that's like I'm saying, this is a comprehensive thing. This takes a while. You got a lot of reading to do, a lot of thinking to do. But you read each of the 7 indicators for each of the 6 leadership standards. When you have this filled out, right, this chart here, with all your proficient, exemplary, whatever it is, and you'll have that visual there. At that point, you will go in and you will evaluate your superintendent's performance on the standard. It does not pre-fill. This is something that you really have to think about. I get that question all the time. Well, if I check off exemplary all the time, why isn't it just pre-fill with exemplary? That's easy to do. But sometimes, maybe indicator 1 is more important to you and to your board than indicator 2. And maybe indicator 3 is more along the lines of indicator 2. But if you had an exemplary in 1 and proficient in 2 and 3, you may still want to rate your superintendent exemplary because 1 is so important to you. And that's a conversation that you will bring to the board. What I like about this the most is that there is a real emphasis on discussion here. It's not, even though there's a lot of ratings that are required of you, and I'm just going through the actual instrument right now. When you go through the process with your board, and if you take the steps that NJASA and NJSBA suggest as best practice, there is more conversation. And it's a much richer evaluation for that. Speaking of conversation, you'll probably notice at the end there that it says board member comments supporting rating. I can't encourage board members enough to take advantage of that. Especially if you're using one of the ratings that are on either end of the spectrum. It's very, I don't know, it just kind of raises my eyebrows when I'm putting these together and I see, you know, one board member or two just check off an unsatisfactory, which is completely out of line with everybody else's, and there's no comments. You know, how do you know what are they basing it on? Or vice versa, right? If you have, you know, an exemplary and everybody else is kind of is not happy, why is that? You know, so these comments that you put in there will be the precursor for the discussion that you should be having at the table when it's time to put together what this narrative is going on. So I know I'm talking a lot. Any questions up until this point? Okay.
It doesn't seem much different than what we've been doing for years, just that explain what the different levels are.
Well, yeah, when you start looking at the standards, you see that they are different. Frankly, I think they're better. I think they're a little bit more visionary.
But it's not completely different.
It's not, yeah. It's not like we took out facility, like you're not talking about
It's not a difficult process to just go online and read this and do it yourself.
It is not. It
No,
is absolutely not.
Very simple.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'm going to quote you on that.
You can.
Yeah, thanks. It does take time. And the other thing, too, that you guys should know, which is why I'm very pleased not only just to be back in Sussex-Wantage, but to be doing this, is part of the reason why we're hearing so much about these this year, is that QSAC has changed. And QSAC now highlights the superintendent's evaluation process, where it didn't before. And I can never remember what it is, but it's either 6 or 7 points. There's 14 points on your QSAC. Everybody works so hard in the district to get a good QSAC score. This is completely on the board, 14 points up for grabs. 6 or 7 of those, I can never remember which one, requires that your new board members are trained in how to do this, so this takes care of that. We got 6 points.
How long ago did this come into effect, the new, as you're saying, the new standards?
The new standards came into effect last year, but you could also work under the old standards too. Last year, districts had a choice. They could kind of ease their way into this new one while still relying on the old one to be their actual evaluation instrument. This year, the old one has gone away, and we only have the one option, which is good. It's a lot less confusing for everybody. It's a better instrument, frankly. But the new focus on this evaluation, or whatever evaluation you use in your district, being done by July the 1st, is new when QSAC was updated. So this
And
is
it's
the first
recommended by school board to do an evaluation irregardless, whether
It's
you have
not-
an interim, whether you have a regular superintendent that we've hired.
It's required that you evaluate your superintendent annually. That's in this,
But
right? That's in
not
this.
when you have an interim.
You know what, with an interim, there's different interpretations of that. In Sussex
We
County,
discussed that last
yeah,
year.
in Sussex County, and in other counties that I've worked in, you know, the interims are kind of, you know, especially ones where there are districts out there, multiple interims in, you know, a couple of years, so they kind of get passed on.
Well,
But-
my understanding is that it's not carved out by the law, that you don't evaluate your interim superintendent. So we had a sitting superintendent for 2 years, and it's my understanding that that superintendent was not evaluated for 2 years while he sat.
Well, I'm here to talk about this
I
year going
understand that, but
forward, so,
I'm talking
yeah.
about the new performance and what we have to do, but it's my understanding, and I understand what Mr. Hyden was saying, that these are all new, and it seems very simple, but I
It's-
guess I call question to the fact that for 2 years, none of the sitting members and I had had a conversation with Mr. D'Agostino questioning why we were having a training session, because if everybody was was aware of how we were gonna train, that we really wouldn't need a training session except for
Well, you
maybe the
do-
three
well,
new
you-
We
board
did have
members.
discussions about whether we were required to evaluate an interim superintendent, and we were advised that the interim superintendent didn't necessarily, was not required to have, but
Yeah.
when you have a sitting superintendent,
Is-
yeah, you have to, and the sitting superintendent in this district was always evaluated.
And I'm sure that your attorney was part of this conversation.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
So there you
exactly,
go.
and so
there
was
you
New
go.
Jersey School Boards, right?
Well, we are just advisory, we're
Right,
not
but
regulatory.
we did
Also,
have-
we say,
we
talk to
did
your
have
attorney and
conversations.
talk to your executive tenancy.
Right, and we're also,
So, yeah.
we're required to do board self-evaluation.
You are not required
Not under
anymore.
CUSAC
You are
anymore.
not required
You
anymore.
were in the past.
That's absolutely right, that's the anymore thing. So it's a best practice, absolutely, but it's not required. This, evaluating your superintendent in some method is required.
Right.
Doesn't have to be this whole song and dance, but going forward, you have a permanent
Right.
superintendent now, you're getting the training.
Exactly.
I hope you use this, but it's no skin off my back if you don't. What's most important is that the board and the superintendent agree on the method. And that you do the training, check that box off, and also that it's done by July the 1st. By July the 1st, you need a narrative document that has both of your signatures on it, dated July the 1st or previous. That will
What's
cost you, yeah.
What's the requirement for the superintendent to have his piece in to us so that we can start
Well,
the evaluation?
Yeah,
process?
let's talk about that. So what I want to do, so no more questions on the actual instrument, I suppose, right? Good. Yeah, it's pretty, like you said, anyone can read this and figure it out. You don't even need to read it, as you click through, you'll kind of find it. So let's look at, we have a sample calendar in this book, and I think it's on page 5, but I'm not, yep, it's on the bottom of page 5, right? So we have a suggested flow chart here on the different steps that you need to take. But I'd like to focus your attention on the calendar, because that seems to be the most useful for boards. So, are you guys twice a month, once a month? I can't remember. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to look at what's your meeting date closest to July the 1st. And you pull that in the bottom, we work our way up from the bottom up. Because by July the 1st, you need to have presented your superintendent with an evaluation in what is called the summary conference. The summary conference is when the evaluation is written, it's all done, the board has talked about it already, the board president has written it, he's shared it with you before the summary conference, so you can familiarize yourself with what it is. You go into executive session, Nick, you need to raise the superintendent, and go into closed session, I'm sure you don't want this in open, I've never heard of one being in open. And then if there's any discussion surrounding the instrument, it can take place at that time. A lot of times there isn't. It's like, okay, guys, I'm done. That's fine. It's different from board to board. So you need to fill in what that date's going to be. So let's work backwards. So what you'll have to do, the next rung up for the board on this is the third one up. It's another white square, right? The board executive session meeting to review compilation and determine majority opinion. My suggestion is that that's the meeting immediately preceding that. And let me describe what that meeting is going to be like. All of the board members will have completed this, unless you're conflicted, but I don't think we have any conflicted people here, right? They all complete this, and I, as your field service representative, go in, I compile everything into one report. That report will have everybody's ranking and everybody's comments from top to bottom in one consolidated report. All of the rankings will be anonymous. You will not know who ranked him this way, who said this, who said that. It will all be there, but there won't be any identifiers with it. So when the board meets in executive session without Mr. Bull present, you'll discuss what those results look like and what that narrative should say. So pencil in whatever that meeting is. After that meeting, and Nick, it's probably in your policy manual, it's generally the board president, sometimes it's not, but usually it is, will create the narrative based on that discussion. And for your convenience, we do have a template in this book, and we also have a template online. And the template starts on page 13, And it runs to, I guess, page, what is it, 17, no, 16. And it's as simple as checking off what the board believes the final ranking should be in all of these areas, and then putting supporting remarks in there. That's the narrative part. That is really valuable, and that's something that the board should come to consensus on. And when I say consensus, I also want to note, and it's in the statute or the code, I forget which, it's a majority document. So what the majority feels is what goes in this, not the outliers. You may have outliers who have very strong opinions about one or more items on it, but they don't get, those opinions do not get written in the narrative. It is a majority document. It belongs to the board. During the summary conference, during discussion, those outliers could be brought up, those dissenting viewpoints, and a lot of times superintendents welcome those. It's a learning experience. But it's important that they don't be written in black and white. Because it's not, the report that I give you is going to be a collection of individual board members' evaluations. And some districts, I've seen this, they staple that together and they hand that to the superintendent and say, we're done. And it flies in a way, but it's not a board document. It's a collection of individuals with no discussion. So I think you're getting what I'm saying here, why it's
These folks aren't shy about telling me how they feel.
Why does that have the ring of truth to it? So, okay. Well, in any case, all right.
Where
So,
do we do it?
when do you do it?
Where?
At a board meeting, an
No, I
executive
mean
session.
like the evaluation, do we do it on a computer?
You will
Like,
do it
we at
online, yep, I'm
home?
kind of moving backwards here, but yeah, you'll go on to njsba.org and you'll
Oh,
log
so we
in.
can do it from home?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. I've had people do it on their phones. I will tell you this, they're calling me all the time, oh, it doesn't work on my phone. Dude, try to avoid that. I understand those bugs have been worked out, but I just don't recommend it. And also, it's, this is not big
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know, yeah, and I don't know how you can kind of do that on the fly, while you're shopping in the supermarket and thinking, that's just doesn't sound robust to me, but, to each his own. All right,
If
so,
somebody, for some reason, doesn't have access, I'm sure Mrs. Riker can arrange something for you on campus.
yeah, I've seen it where people, fill this out, and if they trust somebody to actually enter it, there's ways around it. And if you have questions or difficulties with access, let me know. There were a few kinks last year, but not many, and they've all been ironed out. So I'm really looking forward, and so far, it's been going really well. Okay, so anyway, so we talked about executive session to review the compilation of determining majority opinion. We understand that? Is everybody good with that? Okay, very well. So, NJSBA compiles the individual responses. That's me. I'll need to have everybody's in, I would say, depending on how you want them delivered. If an electronic link is okay with you, and that's the majority of districts use that, then theoretically, I should be able to do that the day before, as long as there are no system problems. This is not difficult for me to compile. If you want a paper packet, I'm gonna need at least a week and a half's notice to print them all out and try and drive them forward, which I don't mind, it's just keep that in mind for your time. All right, board completes their evaluations, that's gotta be done before I get the order to compile, so keep that in mind as well. And then, right before that, the superintendent self-evaluates. That's who opens the portal for you. If you try to do it tonight, it's not gonna work. The superintendent goes in, enters the district goals for everybody, evaluates his own performance on the district goals, and then for the leadership standards, and this is new for this evaluation, which is a tremendous improvement, is Mr. Gall or whatever superintendents use this format will be able to enter what we call artifacts, online live links to evidence that he demonstrates leadership in this standard, in that standard, how he's completed the goals. As a former board member who had to rifle through all of her stuff that's all over the place, trying to figure out, where did I see that, where did I see that, oh, I remember we were talking about that. It is just, I can't tell you how much I think that that's wonderful. It also gets everybody in
You
this.
folks offer any guidance on, I know it's probably quality over quantity, but a general rule of thumb about how many artifacts you would have?
Well, that dovetails beautifully into the next part of our calendar, which is, I believe, the pre-conference, okay? So, that's the first line, right? Board and Superintendent Evaluation pre-conference. That would be done ideally after a goal update, you know how you do your regular goal updates. You convene an executive session because it is evaluative, you'll need to price them, as usual with any of these discussions. And then you just kind of talk to the board, what do you expect from me? Or most likely you may have already done some of that, explain what you have entered in there, because you can work on this, save it, and go away for a few days and come back. You don't hit complete until you're just about ready for the board to go in to evaluate you, which I'll discuss in a minute. But, you know, if for instance, you know, I have boards that standard one is really important to them. So the mission, vision, value, so they want to be loaded up with artifacts on that. Whereas other areas may not be so much, you know, so it's kind of a good coming together on, you know, not wasting your time focusing on a standard or a goal that everyone pretty much already agrees has been completed. And you're going back, you know, 11 months trying to ferret out artifacts that I'm sure would be useful. But again, it's all about a wise use of your time. And it's just kind of like any sort of pre-evaluative conference where you work most likely. I mean, I know I have them, I'm not sure if you guys do, but that's kind of the format. You know, and that's, again, another opportunity for discussion, which is why I really like this process. You know, I hope you're noticing that there's a lot of opportunities for discussion, which is really the way it should be.
If I could just ask the board, does everyone feel comfortable doing that on the 17th?
17th of what? This month?
It's our meeting.
Is everybody comfortable using this format? That's the first question.
Yes, yes, it is.
She just wanted to do a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Actually, the first question would be with, not to put you on the spot, Mike, but it's for you, because you're the one that starts the process, so if you don't like it, I mean, you know, the board's kind of out of luck, so, you know.
And then you know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, I know, what a great question he asked, right? How's he gonna answer that? But it is a question that does need to be asked. Not everybody uses us, and that's okay, you know, that's all right. But what else was I, okay, so also, what you should know is that when you go in to self-evaluate and you hit finish, there is a hard 48-hour window before the board members can get in to do their evaluations. The reason why this was put in place, and this was also a joint thing between ASA and us, is I can't tell you how many times superintendents really, something comes up at a board meeting, or something is triggered in their memory, or with a conversation that they forgot to add something. And rather than us going in and, you know, that is laborious, and with, you know, all the districts trying to do it at once, got a little difficult. So the best practice is we've got 48 hours after you hit I'm finished, before board members can go in and evaluate you. But in those 48 hours, you can add, you can subtract, you can adjust. So that's actually a good thing, but you need to work that into your timetable.
And I don't recall on my end, having done the one part previously, do we see what I put in before or after? for
They'll see what
comparison's
you
sake?
put in before.
Okay.
Because they'll lead with part one, which is the goals, which is really going to be a lot of your input. You'll be evaluating yourself on it,
Yeah.
and whatever artifacts you want to add. So that's gonna be a lot of, you know,
So they see my score as they're creating their score.
when you say as they're creating, yes, they'll
Myself.
see that you will say, yeah, I've achieved this.
Okay.
And they can either agree with you or have a different ranking.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, that's how it will work. And then, after that 48 hours is over, it is gonna look like it's signed by me. I did not send it. It's a system-generated email that says, dear board member, I might even say your name, your superintendent's evaluated himself, now please go in and here's a link. Those emails have been winding up in spam. Please check your spam for it. If Mike has advised you, I've evaluated myself and it should be open for your use on X day, and you just can't find this system-generated email. It's not in spam, it's not in your email. You can access it in another way. You can go through our njsba.org, click on Field Services, and you will see the way to do it. It's pretty self-explanatory. I do have like a pathway. If you wanted me to send it to you, you can just shoot it out to the board. I've been recommending that superintendents who evaluate themselves let the board know outside of the email that you're expect them from me. Because like I said, those things are going into spam, and I have board members saying, oh, I didn't get the link, and it really holds things up. That's my one regret about this one, and I'm not sure if that key has been worked out. So, pay attention to Mike when he says, I'm done, you got 48 hours, then go in and do it. Because like you'll notice, this is comprehensive. New board members, please don't feel badly if you use a lot of not observed, that's typical. I wouldn't expect you to have the same breadth of experience as your board members who have been here for a long time. You know, there's a lot of confidential information, a lot of you have been at every meeting. It's nothing to feel bad about, but do participate, because it gets you used to how to do this. You know, you're part of the board, your discussion and your comments are valued. And, you know, you just work within your own limits of experience and be realistic about it. And it will turn out to be a high-quality document, I think, if you rely on board conversation, and if you do all those steps. I mean, even if you don't use our format, I do suggest that you use that calendar, because that'll keep you in line with the statute, with the code, and it'll also keep your CUSAC nice and clean for yourself. That is my spiel. I'm just wondering if you guys are confused, or have any questions, or...
I like the system last time we used it, and it probably went better, so.
Good. I was gonna put you on that.
When was the last time you used it?
When Jean was here,
So we haven't evaluated in 2 years.
we had no reason to.
Okay. How did we then approve his contract for 2 years? He was here for 2 years. How did we approve the contract? So we have not approved a superintendent's contract
We
in 2 years when he was the interim, the entire board.
We contacted New Jersey School Boards and talked to our attorney, and it wasn't necessary to do this comprehensive evaluation process with an interim superintendent. Just, that's the way it is. It's not like
Okay, well,
we
it's not
didn't
carved
eva-
out
it's
in the
not
law.
like
If
we
you read the
didn't
law, it's not
evaluate
carved out that way.
a sitting, it's not like we didn't evaluate a sitting superintendent for several years. It's not even that at all. It's not even close to that. We all agreed that we would continue the process of having an interim superintendent for 2 years. It's just what we did.
Okay, well, and I respect that, but it's not carved out in the law that you don't,
Right, it's not carved out in the law that we have to.
Well,
And we did do what was,
you have an attorney, right?
right,
We don't expect board members to be, I mean, it's in here, and I always direct people's eyes to this, but you're not lawyers. You have a lawyer to help keep you on the
Right.
straight and narrow, and you rely on your attorney's advice. So I'm pretty confident that if you've done that and you've moved forward, and now that you have a permanent superintendent, you're ready to jump back into.
so if we
the
choose another
regular-
process, we have to, it's a good idea to follow the calendar that's outlined here.
And the only thing that, you know, as far as that calendar goes, that pre-conference, that's just a best practice, right? You know, who writes the narrative, whether it's the board president or his designee, that's probably in your bylaws, you know, but that hard July 1st date is important. And also the fact that the board contributes and that is a board document is also important.
And then we'll need to do an executive session, so to keep within that, calendar. Yeah.
So you will know your times. And if I can help you out with anything, let me know.
We have the 2 meetings in May too, so potentially we'll need to do it.
We have 2 meetings in May?
May 1st or
May
May
1st and May 8th.
I don't write this down.
It's in the, I put it in the weekly rundown last time.
Do you think I read that all the time? I'm being honest. I probably did, and I just didn't.
Sometimes you read it and it doesn't.
It doesn't click, yeah. Because I usually put everything on my dates.
May 1st is the public budget hearing, and then May
I
8th,
remember
we
that.
have to have it earlier because of personnel. So that's the only other meeting.
Okay, I'm gonna get the rest of the month off.
Well, Kathy, thank you very much for your time
Thank you.
and coming
My
out.
pleasure, no, if you got any questions, give me a jingle, but I bet you guys will be, able to. Thanks for
Thank you, I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Thank you.
And at this time, we'll move on to audience remarks. Members of the audience are invited to make brief comments about items on this agenda and matters of interest to the district. Anyone? All right, seeing none, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?